first installment of our epic series, where we will look at the epic battle of humans versus chess computers. In this series, we will look at the strategies developed by the humans to combat the ever more advanced technology of the chess computers. In the first installment here, we will travel back in time to 1989. We can see we have some chess computers here. This is from 79, this is from the mid-80s, this is from the early 90s. These are standard commercially available chess computers. This is not what we will look at today. No, in 1989, a guy named Feng Xing-shu, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, but I probably don't, had developed something extraordinary, something completely new. A chess chip that was able to generate 700,000 chess positions per second. He did this by approaching the technology in a new way, effectively gluing transistors together in a 8x8 grid like a chessboard. So the chip, if you look at the chip, it's absolutely amazing. It looks like a chessboard. And this chess chip had taken the world of chess by storm. Earlier this year, in 1989, it had done the impossible. It had defeated an actual chess grandmaster in over-the-board play. And now Xu had teamed up with more people from his university. They had made this chip into a full-fledged chess computer. They called it Deep Thought, named after the supercomputer in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What is the next goal after defeating a grandmaster? What is the next test for a chess computer? It's the chess world champion, the human chess world champion, we should add, in this moment in time. And in 1989, that was none other than Garry Kasparov, the best human chess player of all time. So the team at Carnegie Mellon University, where they had developed the computer, arranged a 2-game match against the world champion. And we will look at those games, those 2 games, today, while we will look at the strategy employed by both sides and see how they match up and find out who will come out on top. In the first game, Deep Thought had the white pieces and opened up with pawn to e4. Now, what kind of answer, what kind of strategy will the human come up with against this? Kasparov played pawn to c5. This is known as the Sicilian defense. And while we are quite early back in 89, we will see a pretty simple anti-computer strategy from Kasparov. It will be very interesting to watch that strategy develop over the years as the computers get more and more advanced. So we see pawn to c3 from Deep Thought, preparing to strike with d4, e6 by Kasparov. Something very similar here, d4 by Deep Thought, and d5 by Kasparov. So let's talk a little bit about the contrast. So it looks like these 2 players are doing the same, sitting at a chessboard. We can look at it, we can understand it. They are playing chess. But of course, Kasparov's mind works in a very different way than the electronical circuits of the chess chip. The raw processing power of the computers are orders of magnitude greater than what any human could manage and can manage. But there is a difference between calculating and understanding what it is you are calculating. That's where humans have the edge, or at least had the edge. Maybe that will change as we go along. Humans can rely on intuition. But what is that really? It's not just a vague gut feeling, it's experience honed through years of pattern recognition. So if we were to ask, how many positions can Kasparov process in a second? Well, that is impossible to give a clear answer to. It could be anywhere from none to a billion, because his understanding of chess comes from thousands of games distilled to their essence, free from fluff and unnecessary information that a computer like Deep Thought must sift through in all its calculating processes. So, bishop to e3 here. Kasparov advances this pawn, claiming a bit of space here in White's camp very, very early in the game. There is a famous quote by José Raúl Capablanca, who was world champion back in the 1920s, and when asked how many moves he could see ahead in chess, he didn't say 700,000. He said, I can only see one move ahead, but it's always the correct one. Okay, so pawn to b3, challenging the advanced structure of black. This is accepted. And Deep Thought captures here. So, the knight is developed by Kasparov, and knight coming to a3 from Deep Thought. So what is Kasparov really doing? He has an isolated pawn. He doesn't have as much development as White. So what is going on? Let's find out. Knight comes to c6. And Deep Thought comes in with this knight, calculating far ahead, seeing that maybe there is something with this bishop. Kasparov does not mind. He understands that this bishop does exactly the same here on this backward square as it does here. So he's not afraid to put this back because he just cares about this very important diagonal. Deep Thought develops a bishop, making ready for castling. And Kasparov puts out a bishop as well and challenges this bishop as well. Deep Thought likes space advantage. Computers still like space advantage and plays pawn to c4 to challenge the center. Kasparov is okay with this and just castles his king to safety. See a bit of an unorthodox move. Rook to a4. Queen comes to d7, now working in concert with the bishop, and this knight understands, I don't have much to do here, I didn't really get this bishop, I'll go back again. So this is the first time the computer loses a bit of time moving the same piece twice and not getting that far. Kasparov says, okay, I can actually improve this bishop just a little bit and put it on c7. A bit of a mysterious move. Before, he was happy to have it here on b8. Now it goes to c7. Deep Thought starts exchanging pieces. Kasparov probably pretty happy with this. He has the black pieces. He's not sure how strong this computer is. And with the black pieces, maybe it would be okay with a draw. If you want a draw, well, exchanging pieces is generally good. Now again a knight move, coming with a one-move threat, coming here to attack the queen, no problem. The queen drops back. Deep Thought castles, so far it plays very, very well, but maybe there is room for improvement. The rook comes here, starts working with the queen to protect this and potentially dominate the d-file. Rook comes to e1 with a similar idea just along the e-file. Kasparov says 2 can play at that game and challenges this rook. So we are at a stage now where we can say we have completed development and we can start to evaluate a little bit. Both players have all their pieces in play and their kings safely castled. Right now, the focal point is here in the center, where Deep Thought has way more space with all these pawns. So that is a strong point for white in this position. So what has Kasparov tried to achieve? Well, this knight doesn't do much here. It can't come here under attack. It can't come here. So it could go back like the other one. That is mostly it. Also, this rook could be a little bit out of place. So not much to really hone in on and start an attack from either side just yet. Deep Thought now plays this pawn coming to c5. Maybe that is a bit of a positional mistake. Yes, you do take more space, and computers love to have space. Yes, you control this square, but in the immortal words of Grandmaster Viktor Korchnoi, the meanest man in chess, pawns can't move backwards. And this pawn will be very hard to capture now. At least by a pawn. You can't really capture that with a pawn. So now Kasparov's position is more safe. And he immediately starts prodding a little bit. He plays this bishop out. Bishop coming to a5, attacking this knight, pinning it to the rook, being nicely protected by his own knight. Deep Thought says, okay, even more center control, centralizing move by the queen, queen to d3, and Kasparov plays this little move, a6. This is a move that we will later see employed also by Kasparov in the Sicilian against computers. But he understands later that how important this move is, and he will actually insert it later as early as move 2 to optimize his strategy. We see pawn to h3 by the computer controlling this square. And Kasparov exchanges voluntarily his dark squared bishop for the knight. It is recaptured by the queen. So why does he do that? Why does he do that? Well, now his knight can jump in, and you can see he is actually saying, okay, you got this space here, but those pawns are not moving anywhere, and I'm starting to just make dents into the position on the other side of the board, saying I am sucking the energy in this way, in this direction here, and it's a bottomless pit. You can't go anywhere with the energy you invest here, but I can go somewhere on the other side of the board. Computer is happy to exchange these knights. It was not so good here, so let's exchange it, but the queen comes in. Nicely defended there. A bit of a mysterious move by the computer. You can see sometimes it plays without a plan. It goes back to a2 with the rook. So if you wanted the rook there, maybe you should have put it there from the start. Kasparov, however, does have a long-term plan. He plays rook to e6, and we see that maybe the computer actually did have a plan, because the rook now comes to e2, doubling up with the other rook. This is mirrored by Kasparov, and what is this about? This is about both the computer very impressively and Kasparov realizing that the way Kasparov has played the game so far has locked this position here. Not much action, not many open files for the computer on this side of the board, so it's trying to shift the attention over here. But we see some small differences, particularly the position of this queen versus the position of this queen. Computer tries to remedy that and goes here, working in concert with the bishop. A mysterious move by Kasparov, pawn to f6. Ben Feingold would be spinning in his grave. What is that about? Maybe we will see later on in the game the power of this mysterious move. The queen now comes to c3, sort of abandoning the plan it had earlier. Maybe again we get a hint that it's playing a little bit without a plan. But what is this? h5. Is this a very aggressive pawn? Are we going to see an attack against white's king even? Computer pushes the b pawn, further locking the pawn structure. And Kasparov very patiently says, well, maybe someday there will be an attack here, someday there will be an attack here. Let me just put this rook here, and maybe there is even a further point along the line. Maybe. King comes here, trying to get out of a potential coming attack. And now we start to see the point of Kasparov's play. Pawn to g5. Yes, it's going to be a tactical pawn storm against the king. Something that we will not see that much as we progress along the history of the development of the technology inside the computers. And if you thought that the computer was playing a little bit without a plan earlier, look at this move. King comes back. It doesn't do anything. And here we can pause a little bit and talk a little bit about why Kasparov played the way he did. He is exploiting not a bug, but a problem with chess computers in general, something called the horizon effect. So if you imagine a sea of variations, you look down the line in chess and you calculate, then you go back, then you calculate a different line. For a computer, at some point, it reaches a horizon where if it has to go one move further in all the different lines, it goes from having to calculate maybe 10 million different moves. Well, the next move in all those lines, that would add 1 billion extra positions, and then maybe 10 billion, and it just goes bananas due to exponential growth extremely, extremely quickly. So what Kasparov has done is extremely clever. He has locked the position, playing very safely, getting this locked structure, exchanging off all the active pieces of white, so that the computer doesn't have any clear plan. There's nothing it can bite on. There's no weakness that it can easily attack. What happens in that situation? What happens in that situation is the computer looks down 700,000 positions per second, some millions of positions, getting 5, 6, 7 moves deep in all different possibilities, all the different stuff that could happen. But in none of those, it actually gets any advantage. In none of those, it actually comes anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere because everything is so well protected. It can't make any progress. And what does the computer do? The computer is programmed with something called the minimax algorithm, meaning that it will always choose the move that it has the best potential with the minimal risk involved. And when it can't find anything that has any potential, it just plays the minimum risk move, which is not active and gives Kasparov free play, and that is why the king has started moving back and forth. How will the human exploit this? With an attack. So we can maybe see if we are able to capture here that this rook would have an extra point of pointing at the king. Deep Thought says no thank you and advances this pawn, trying to keep everything solid. But with this passive play by the computer, Kasparov can make inroads and claim more and more space. The computer got the space in the beginning. Kasparov set it up so that his strategy allowed him to gain the space later in the game. Again, we have a move that doesn't do anything. Queen coming to b2. And now we can see these pawns are ready to attack. The queen is ready to attack. The rooks are ready to attack. But this knight would be very nice to have. This knight could teleport it maybe here. Wouldn't that be cool or something? Some here so we could attack this pawn. And Kasparov set it up in such a way that he now has a lot of time that he can use to get his last piece into action. The knight comes here. So is it going this way or is it even going this way? Where is this knight going? How will Kasparov utilize this knight? Of course, this also has a short-term goal of protecting against the advancement of this pawn, which is now protected by the knight. Again, the queen doesn't do anything, so it's okay, this threat was easily met, we just come back. And Kasparov has all the time in the world, he also goes back. Queen comes here, doesn't do anything, and the knight starts to make inroads. Now the knight comes here, and do you have an idea for what square this knight could be heading for? You will see in a moment. But first, let's make all the preparatory moves we need. We have all the time in the world. Okay, our knight is attacked. What could we do? Where do we want to put the knight? Here. So look at all this amazing progress that Kasparov has finally made. This knight is super strong. It's attacking here, it's attacking here. The rooks are lined up here, the queen lined up beautifully against the king, and the pawns are ready to push. So he has set everything up. Now he starts again to prod a little bit. The king makes a non-move. The rook comes in, trying to keep everything together. Of course, now there are dangers on the light squares. The queen comes in on the light squares immediately. Computer tries to break free, but Kasparov says no thank you. Computer insists, and Kasparov says, well, I did put the rook here to protect this pawn a million moves ago, so I'm actually not worried about this. Also not worried about this pawn because the knight covers that very nicely. So, what piece is not in play? Knight. This pawn is defending here the rooks, the queen, those pawns. This pawn is not in play. Let's utilize everything we have. Okay, pawn takes, but just rook takes, no problem at all. Not only doesn't this move do anything really, actually the king is starting to get really, really exposed now. And we see Kasparov pounce on his plan and advance this pawn, protected by the queen, protected by the rook, and this bishop is in trouble. Therefore, pawn takes pawn. And will this pawn be recaptured? No. Kasparov sacrificed that pawn to get all his forces into the game. So he advances with this one, and now the king is really starting to feel the heat. The queen desperately tries to come back. With the queen out of the way, the rook comes back. All the forces are pointing at the king. The king is sweating. Desperately, the computer tries to advance this pawn, but Kasparov says no problem and captures here with the first check of the game. And now everything is falling. The rook recaptures, but an exchange of queens. And we simply win the bishop. The pressure was too much. The computer couldn't defend everything. It chose to defend the king, of course, because without it, it lose the game. But let me tell you something. Without the bishop, you also lose the game if you're playing against Kasparov. Computer tries to claim the open file, but Kasparov just starts harvesting with his knight. Computer tries to go for this pawn here. And Kasparov says, well, you can have it. I'll make a queen with this one. So rook tries to defend, but the rook is immediately challenged. And in this position, Feng Shu and the computer team resigned on behalf of Deep Thought, because this position is at this point easily winning for Kasparov. Basically, there is no way to stop this pawn from promoting and becoming a queen. And if you think it's hard to play against Kasparov if you're down a knight, imagine being down a queen. Now let's take a look at the second game. So in the first game, Kasparov was able to pretty quickly absorb the aggressive expansion of the computer, and he then exploited the horizon effect to make the computer commit a series of moves that didn't do anything, that allowed him to get all his pieces into the perfect place, and he could then strike and beat the computer. Now he has the white pieces. Will that make a difference for how he plays? Let's take a look. So, with the white pieces in game 2 of this mini-match of 2 games, Kasparov only needs a draw to win the match. So what will he do? He plays pawn to d4, a somewhat more positional, somewhat more slow move than e4, which the computer went with. So what kind of opening defense will the computer try? d5, c4, this is the Queen's Gambit. Maybe you've seen the excellent series of the same name. We get the Queen's Gambit accepted. And e4, attacking the bishop and controlling a lot of squares. A knight comes out to attack and undermine this. Kasparov is saying that is fine, I will defend, no problem, I am in no hurry to get back the pawn. And the computer puts out this bishop, sort of naively saying, okay, it's about this knight defending here, I want to capture here, so I will pin this knight to the queen. But Kasparov is playing extremely aggressively now, saying that this is already kind of a mistake by black. So he pushes this pawn, saying you can't capture it if it's not there, and now I'm attacking the knight. Where will the knight go? Well, it could go here, and that is what it does. And Deep Thought is thinking, okay, we are teaming up against this knight, and we are making a great attack. Probably Kasparov will now capture back his pawn, and we will be all good. But no, Kasparov doesn't capture back his pawn. He instead develops this knight. Computer is, it can't be annoyed, but it is having some problems with these advanced pawns, so it tries to challenge them. Kasparov still not recapturing. Kasparov develops playing with a level of aggression that was possible against computers back in '89. Maybe that will change later. And this knight now goes back here, and we can see that the knight here has danced around a little bit. It is attacking the bishop, but the bishop does drop back. And if we make a contrast already from the positions of the two players, the computer and the human, we can see that Kasparov has the knights out, bishop out, attacking this pawn, has these two advanced pawns. He's doing great. And we have this sort of nonsensical position for black where this knight is developed, but it's on this weird square. It was supposed to work in concert with the bishop, but it doesn't. Now the bishop doesn't make as much sense here. We don't have any real center control, and we are a far cry from castling in this position. The computer tries to challenge the center control, captures here, Kasparov recaptures. And the computer now tries to go back with the knight, trying to justify the strategy that it has been playing. So that's a lot of moves for a knight. And let's talk a little bit about that, because we can look at that now and we can use our understanding and our chess knowledge to say that, okay, we know in chess you're not supposed to move the same piece many times in the opening. Why? Well, because you lose time that you need to develop the other pieces, and these pieces don't work that well together if they are not developed in some way, giving you a great disadvantage. And this is a huge weakness of the computer. Or is it? Because the reason the computer are making these moves is that it is playing without bias. It doesn't have any feelings, any emotion. It doesn't think it looks weird. It's not ashamed to make these moves. It just calculates, and it has no bias, and it says, according to my calculations, this is the best move. What if the computer could calculate a couple of orders of magnitudes more? Then this totally unbiased approach, where it doesn't have any feelings about chess, it's just calculating, will allow it maybe to see something that looks really weird or is very offbeat, but looks very offbeat to humans, but is maybe in that exact position where it needs it, the right move. That will be very interesting to look at as we go along in the series. Kasparov plays this strong centralizing queen move with an attack here. It is a bit of a sacrifice of this pawn here. Knight comes in, it is recaptured, and the bishop recaptures, and we can actually see that Kasparov is down with 2 pawns at this point, and he knows that the computer is very greedy. It very much wants to capture pieces, and let's talk a little bit about why it wants to capture pieces and how Kasparov is using it in this game for his approach. So how does a computer evaluate a chess position? How does it know when something is good and when something is bad? The very first idea that we are actually still working with in chess programming was to simply count what we call the material for each side. Say what side has most material, that side has the advantage. And then later on we would say, okay, is the king castle, then we have a bit more advantage. Our pawns are getting longer down the board, we have a bit more advantage, stuff like that. The more space we can attack, the more advanced it is, the better it is for us. But the general idea of chess computing is to, if we don't have anything else, we will just look at what side has the most pieces, and that side must have the advantage. And that makes the computer greedy, as we would say in chess, going for capturing pieces at the expense of strategic and positional nuances and factors in the position, and that is what Kasparov is exploiting here. You can see all these pieces here are on their starting squares. So yes, the computer has, only lost these 2 and gained these 2 pawns, yes, but these pieces are not doing anything. Okay, let's continue. Kasparov sacrifices more material. He captures the pawn finally because he understands that you can't come in, computer can't come in and capture here, because simply this check here is almost checkmate. There's only one way to stop it, and that would be to give up the queen. And immediately, for a long time, for a probably deep thought has realized this, and understands that it's not going to capture the rook. Instead, it tries to get some pieces into play, starting with the queen. Actually, you're supposed to get the queen into play as one of the last pieces, usually. Why? Because a queen is the most valuable piece you have, except for the king, meaning that if it is attacked, it almost always have to move, causing you to lose more time. Queen comes here, trying to exchange itself for the other queen, lowering the pressure on the black position. Kasparov says, no, thank you, and plays the queen to c5. Deep thought, again, really wants to exchange the queens, and again, Kasparov does not want to exchange the queens. Note that this queen move here exposes an attack on this queen from the bishop, so the queen has to move again. But it's already too late, and at this point, the computer may have looked at this position from 7 moves ago, and that was the horizon at that point. It didn't calculate any further because it would have to evaluate a billion different things to get one move further. But the problem is now that if you try to save the queen, you can't go here because this check pick up the queen. You can't stay because you lose the queen. You can't go here because the pawn. You can't go here because the knight. You can't go here because the pawn. And if you go any further, this knight check here is completely overwhelming and will result in checkmate, which actually explains the otherwise enigmatic decision of the computer to leave the queen here and play pawn to e6. And Kasparov doesn't even capture the queen. Instead, he plays this flashy moves. He already has a crushing position. Knight coming to c7 with check, allowing seemingly the knight to be captured by the queen. So we can see Kasparov is a pawn and a knight down. His rook is under attack, but like all these pieces, they're not doing anything, and we see the attack come with the force of a sledgehammer now from the one and only Garry Kasparov. Bishop check. Note that the king can't move to dark squares because of the queen. And if you go here, we have checkmate here. So of course you can see checkmate. So you could play here, that would be captured. You can also play here, and that is what the machine chooses because it knows Kasparov is not going to capture with the pawn. He is going to capture with the bishop. Bishop takes queen, check, and now the material situation, number of pieces, and the strength of the pieces looks very, very different. This bishop is recaptured. And that was, of course, necessary because it was check, and Kasparov doesn't want to lose his own queen, so he gets in with his own bishop, doesn't really care about saving this rook. So the bishop is captured, and it's a funny sort of exchange because Kasparov does recapture a bishop, just not this one, but instead this one. Finally, he thinks, okay, I don't want you to attack that rook anymore. We get a check from Deep Thought. What to do from Kasparov? Well, the king safety is not really an issue with this completely pathetic development of the computer, so we just advance the king. Pawn takes pawn. And the queen starts the hunt to just attack here and attack here. Bishop drops back. Rook joins the battle. King tries to escape. But I mean, look at this position. It's very, very tough to do anything for the computer side. Now it gets a piece developed. It only needs to correct the rooks and development will be done. But it's too late. The queen comes over here, tries to stop that with a pawn. The second rook joins. This is basically a formality at this point, attacking here. The knight goes back to defend. And let's just throw everything at the computer, which in this position greedily comes and grabs this completely irrelevant pawn. Kasparov says, okay, I'll capture a relevant pawn instead. King tries to go here because it wants to go up here to free up the rook. Kasparov comes in. Bishop drops back, but we can just take that, no problem. Because we could capture here, but it's even more cool to insert this check. So rook has to capture. What is the point? The point is queen takes with check. The king comes up, and now we can capture the knight. So we get a knight and a rook instead of just the knight. And now we have queen versus rook. So the rook will try, computer will try. It does have a lot of pawns, but Kasparov has some very relevant pawns here, and they are going to try to become queens. Rook up here attacking this, trying to stop it. But Kasparov just protects it, also attacks here, and there is no way for the computer to make any sort of progress. This pawn will walk down the board, it will become a queen, and based on this, the computer team resigned. They could see that the computer gave them in an evaluation that it was losing by 4, so there was no reason to play out the remaining 5, 6, 7 moves of the game. So there you have it, the first 2 games between Kasparov and the computers. In the next installment of this series, we are going to look at the rematch. And a company by the name of IBM looked at the potential of this computer made by these university guys and said, what if we just gave you a boatload of cash and maybe, let's say, 6, 7 years to develop the computer? Maybe you could do something and challenge Kasparov again. And they said, heck yes. And that match happened in '96. And we will look at that in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you had a great time. I sure did.